Hello and welcome to a new interview from MinnMax. I'm Ben Hansen. Our guest today is Shane Kim, which is a name you probably haven't heard for a little while in the video game industry. Shane Kim has an interesting saga going back to Microsoft in 1990. He was working at Microsoft for 20 years, eventually worked his way up, managing the game studios within Microsoft, but eventually worked his way up to becoming the corporate vice president of the interactive entertainment business, as they put it. So he saw the birth of the Xbox, the evolution of the Xbox, an incredible run there, a lot of insight into how the Xbox brand became what it is. Then after that, he went over to GameStop, and he was at GameStop for 9 years. He was the director starting in 2011. He eventually was the interim CEO for a bit. So he has an amazing vantage point into the video game industry overall. And so in this interview, we want to talk to him about the origins of Xbox and Microsoft getting into gaming, his take on the launch of the Xbox One, 360's Red Ring of Death, some highs in there in addition to some lows. He's a smart guy. He's an interesting guy. And we also just talk about GameStop, GameStop's future, what he recommends, what he was pushing for when he was CEO. We think it's an interesting chat, and we hope you get something out of it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. I'm glad you found us. We're MinnMax. We're a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, so thanks for being here. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you can unlock the podcast version of this if you support our Patreon at the $5 tier. You get access to all past and future interviews. You get access to the audio version of The Deepest Dive, which is our huge community game club. We just wrapped one up on Final Fantasy VII Remake. We're going to be doing many more in the future, Last of Us Part 2, so please look forward to that, in addition to a bunch of other exclusive content, so please consider supporting us or spreading the word about MinnMax if you enjoy this interview. But now, without further ado, here's Shane Kim. Shane Kim, welcome to MinnMax, sir.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to hear your voice again. It's been a while for the world, I think.
I doubt that anybody's missed me, but it's nice to be missed.
What's your life like these days? Walk us through like an average day for you. I know the quarantine makes it weird, but maybe a little bit before that.
Yeah, quite honestly, after I left GameStop last year, my life returned to the normalcy I had enjoyed since I left Microsoft. And, really what that means is every day is sort of different. Could be some business lunches, could be playing golf, could be, walking, hiking with my wife, who knows? In the quarantine period, though, I am very happy to report that I've taken advantage of the time and have done an amazing amount of yard work. We had a part of our property that was just a jungle, and I've been out there almost every day, which has been really great at helping to keep the pounds off too. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun. So
and now it just looks like a golf course out there. It's just pristine.
Well, I won't go that far, but it compared to what we had, it is really nice to be able to look at that part of the property and be happy again.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a good retired life here. Do you miss anything about the game industry? Do you ever think back and miss anything in particular?
In the game? Well, yeah. I still am close to the game industry. I have a lot of great friends still at Microsoft in the Xbox division. A lot of those people that I worked with are still there. People like Phil, Bonnie Ross, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of people that I worked with who are still part of the Xbox group. And, and then, of course, I served for 8 years on the board of GameStop, and I really felt like I needed to stay close to the industry. I got to meet some new friends at Sony and Nintendo that, that had not really been part of my social circle, let's say, when I was at Microsoft back in the day. And I really enjoyed that. And so, that helped me obviously stay very close to the industry as well, just from a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine like the early era of Microsoft, you're dealing so much with tech folks. And I'm curious just what you see as like the culture of the game industry that you found appealing, that you're able to find all these friends across all these different folks. Is there kind of like a unifying cultural vibe of the game industry that compares to other industries you've interacted with?
That's a great question, Ben. I mean, the God's honest truth, right, is that I'm not a gamer. I think that's a well understood fact in the gaming industry. And I didn't go to business school to end up in the gaming business. I just happened to migrate there early in my career at Microsoft, which was frankly one of the most fortunate things that happened to me, because I got involved with Ed Fries in the early days of Microsoft Game Studios, long before Xbox came along. This is the mid '90s, and Ed really led the. I won't say revival. It was just golf and flight simulator at the time.
Yeah.
He really led the growth and the expansion of Microsoft Game Studios. Age of Empires, of course, came along and helped quite a bit. And then then the company decided to get in the console business with the Xbox, and that completely added gasoline to the fire. And we took off, and the rest is sort of history. But what was great for me as a business guy was getting to work with incredibly talented, creative people, and I don't have, I make no bones about it. I don't have a creative bone in my body. But to get to work with, people at Bungie and Epic and, Ensemble Studios and some of the great partners that we had, both internal studios and external studios, and to try to work with them constructively as a business guy, get them to trust me, as a suit, really, right? And to have mutual respect and understanding of what we're both trying to accomplish. And I think we had a tremendous run there in the 2000s with Microsoft Game Studios, and I'm really proud of that. Really proud of that time and the foundation that we built there, and of course now it's being taken to a whole new level.
Yeah, how do you connect with developers as a suit then? Other than we'll leave you alone, which is all probably they want to hear, right? We'll give you money and leave you alone. But is there a level beyond that you found throughout your years that you're able to connect more on?
I think most people, in general, it's it's not just true of artists, but most people appreciate honesty and transparency. And it's not like it wasn't like what you described, which was, hey, we'll just give you money and leave you alone. No, we're very much involved, and it was our money, and so we had to manage it carefully. But I think we did it constructively, and our goal was, what I tried to always keep in mind and try to convince other people is that our goals were actually mutually consistent, and that we're trying to create the greatest pieces of art that we could together, because ultimately that's what would drive the success of the Xbox console, which was our primary goal. And so, when you can convince developers and artists that what you're trying to do is help enable them to achieve their dreams, and objectives, if you believe in that, it becomes a lot easier as opposed to this really adversarial relationship that I think is what people most imagine publisher and developer relationships are like.
Right. Do you want to talk about those early Ensemble visits? Like Age of Empires was the first thing, because I'm trying to remember like Pandora's Box. I'm trying to remember like that era of like Microsoft releases, right? But it seemed like Age of Empires, you knew you had something big here. I know Bill Gates in particular seemed to be interested in it, about just like maybe making it more of an educational piece of software overall. But you want to talk about like visiting Ensemble early on and what those discussions were like when you realized that this is really something special?
Well, honestly, it's sort of like Bungie and Halo in the sense that, Ed deserves a lot of credit because I wasn't involved in that. And, and we had business development people who, were always out scouring, trying to find the next thing. And I can't remember who would have connected first with Ensemble and so forth. But, the original Age of Empires, of course, there had been very successful real-time strategy games and, before that. But they tapped into a different approach, a different look and feel, et cetera, that I think really resonated with people. And it wasn't military like Command and Conquer, and it wasn't, space like StarCraft, et cetera. And certainly with the success of the original Age of Empires, we realized we had something big there. And it's funny. I haven't thought about it too much, but it's really not that different from, I'll say our good fortune that we had with Bungie and Halo when we were launching the Xbox. We found them. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly how we found them. We ended up acquiring the studio. That was probably one of the best acquisitions in Microsoft's history, certainly at that time. And that game ended up being one of the greatest franchises, certainly of its time in the industry. So it was very similar to that. I got more involved with Ensemble, and of course Bungie later on, particularly as I took over when Ed left. I had this belief that in any form of art, the best art comes from the best artists. I really believe that. That's not that profound, but I do also think that the best artists, they tend to be, they're emotional, they're irrational by definition, in a sense, and sometimes a little crazy. And that's really what makes it fun. That's what made the job fun. And so, sure, you could be pulling your hair out. It could be maddening at times, but boy, when you actually accomplish something and reach agreement, and all the parties are pulling together to help create things like Gears of War and Halo and Age of Empires and on, it's magical. And you can't. This was always one of the interesting things about Microsoft Game Studios within Microsoft is, I think Microsoft at its heart, fundamentally, certainly back in the day, was an engineering firm. And here we're trying to create art, and really big, expensive art at the time. And imagine going to somebody and saying, "Well, we've got to slip Halo a year because it needs more time. It's not going to be ready. We don't want to release it too early, et cetera." Well, that doesn't fly exactly in the company where you're used to speccing a product and saying, Office is going to ship here and Windows will ship here.
We can't call Windows 98 Windows 99. It has to be Windows 98. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Well, that's why they switched to Windows, 3, 4, 5, etc. It's a lot easier that way.
Oh, yeah.
No, but it was that mentality. They're more used to speccing a product and here laying out the schedule, and the schedule is sort of sacrosanct, right? But in game development, things can go sideways anytime. And if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And that's not the case.
When Microsoft was getting into games then, how were you able to tell when a game was completely off the rails versus just the normal game development off the rails? I mean, if your entire company culture is Microsoft, isn't that a tough thing for a company like that to learn?
Well, and it was because, we really didn't have a lot of experience in the gaming business. And I would argue that products like Flight Simulator and Golf, which were more simulation products, truer to the actual, activity, there weren't a lot of degrees of freedom, right? And so I think we had to learn very, very quickly. And part of it is just, by bringing in more people from the outside. I remember a big, an important hire for us was Ken Lobb.
Yeah.
With all of his gaming experience, but there were others. But also just with the people that we worked with, and that's where people like Ensemble and Bungie and Epic and all of the other great partners that we had overseas, they contributed to our learning more and more about what a game is. We also learned by experience. I mean, as much as I'd love to say that every game project that we ever worked on went smoothly, I'm sure 95% of them did not. And this is where you learn where, hey, things are a little bit off the rails. And, we had a great publishing organization that worked closely with developers to help them. We didn't develop the games, but we worked with them to help them take advantage of the hardware, or they may be having problems in art or whatever the case may be. And those were the people that I certainly relied on the most, especially with external partners, to say, look, this thing is going to slip a month, but we got the resources. We're going to bring in dev resources to help here, et cetera, et cetera. Or, oh my God, this thing is really on fire, and we really need to think about canceling the project.
Yeah,
and that's where you learn, and you hope that the craters you leave are smaller than huge.
Do you remember the biggest 180? Do you remember the game that you thought was the biggest disaster, and then turns out miracles happen, the dev team crunched their asses off, and now it's a miracle? Well,
again, the one that always pops to mind for me is the original Halo, because when it was original, and I don't take any credit for this, I was involved in it, but I remember, though, people were talking about how, when it was first shown, it was really early, the hardware was still early, et cetera. And there were people who were not, they weren't too keen on it, let's say. And, again, by the time we get to launch, it's probably the game, the franchise that saved the Xbox. And, I had the good fortune of running Microsoft Game Studios when Halo 3 was launched back in 2007. Oh my God, 2007, that's a long time ago. But, at the time, it was the biggest entertainment launch in history.
Yeah.
Now, that's been superseded by other games, but that was an incredible time. And you think about where it came from, originally being developed on Apple platforms, et cetera, to being the flagship franchise for the Xbox was pretty amazing.
Do you think if Halo had been just run-of-the-mill to kind of lower-tier shooter, what would Microsoft and Xbox have looked like in the future for you? Do you think there would have been an Xbox 360? I mean, I know it's so impossible to play these hypotheticals, but how important was that?
No, it's a great question. And here's what I'd say is that our lives would have been so much more difficult. And you have to remember, I think, and this is where I think the history is really fascinating. It's like, I don't think Microsoft got into the Xbox business because one day Bill and Steve said, hey, we want to be number one in video games. That wasn't it. Microsoft is, or certainly was at the time, a platform company. And at the time, we didn't have a home platform per se. I mean, Windows was run on home personal computers, but there were 100 million PlayStation 2s out there.
Right.
And, at the time, the real threat, and this is why I think we focus so much more on Sony than Nintendo, the real belief and the real fear, that competitive threat was that Sony would become the de facto platform for the home and therefore, push Microsoft to the side in that respect. And so that's one of the biggest drivers why we got into the Xbox business. So even if Halo had not, if Halo had been run of the mill and the Xbox One had been less successful, et cetera, I still think we would have kept at it. Microsoft has a long history of keeping at things. The joke, obviously, used to be version 3 was when we would get it right. And but I think we still would have gotten into the competition because the objective was larger than being, competitive in the video game business, if you will. And so we weren't going to cede the platform of the home at that time to Sony without a big fight. Fortunately for us, Halo did its job. And that's the way we looked at our roles in Microsoft Game Studios, which was, our job was to create the advertising models for the platform, because if that makes sense. So we had to create the exclusive content that would convince you as a customer to say, look, I want to buy an Xbox, Xbox 360 instead of PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
And I think we did our jobs pretty well, but that's really what we're trying to do is create that unique content that you can only get on Xbox. If Halo had not been as successful in Gears of War and Forza and so forth, if they had not been as successful, obviously our lives as Xbox platform folks would have been very difficult, and Xbox Live for that matter.
How much pressure was there back in the day from the other factions within Microsoft towards, just making sure Xbox is a success? Was it a matter of a monthly meeting and just like, okay, trust me guys, games are going to be good. It's going to be important. This is worth an investment. Was it a lot of skepticism from outside forces within the company, I guess?
Yeah. I think that there was, I think Microsoft's probably not that unique back in the time that, we had a not invented here mentality. And so, if it didn't look like Office, it didn't look like Windows, it had a very high bar to get over, right? And it's funny, monopolies make you, not monopolies, but what should I say, very dominant market position products make it, make you think that life is that easy all the time. And, when you get into a very competitive industry like video games, and a dominant player such as Sony and, of course, Nintendo always lurking, there was a lot of skepticism about our ability. And it's not like the original Xbox was the sleekest piece of hardware that was ever built.
Yeah.
But eventually, and I think Halo really, because remember, Xbox Live didn't launch for another year. Halo really is the thing that convinced people, wow, we can be competitive in this industry and do well. But we went through the Red Rings of Death issue with the Xbox 360, and that, I'm sure caused a lot of people to go, wow, software is a little bit easier than hardware.
Right.
Maybe we've bitten off too much that we can chew. But there was always a lot of pressure because, again, for the company, the objective was to try to establish a platform for the home. Xbox Live was very strategic from that standpoint. We did a good job of convincing everybody, look, here's how the console game works. And a big part of trying to win in the console space is having that amazing exclusive content, nothing bigger than Halo. And, we moved Halo 2, we moved Halo 3. And they were later than people in the company would have liked.
Right.
Right. And of course, that increases the expenses of each title and so forth. Completely the right decisions. The results dwarfed any additional cost. And if you produce a bad game, that doesn't help anybody. So, but there was a lot, obviously, like I said, going back to the culture, if you're used to specifying when a piece of software is going to come out, and you're generally speaking closer than not, it's hard when you say, look, we've got to slip Halo 3 by a year. That's not a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, I bet. I don't know how closely you watch it, but obviously Amazon and Google are trying to get into the game space. I'm sure you were even considering that back in the day a little bit about what would happen if this occurred. What do you think about their strategy? Do you have any advice for them seeing Microsoft's transformation and evolution into the game space?
I think Phil Spencer's a very smart guy, and several months ago he came out and said, "Look, our competition is not Sony and Nintendo; it's Amazon and Google." Right. I think there were a lot of people who sort of looked askance at that. It's maybe especially in the gaming industry, because Amazon and Google are not big players, certainly from, outside of the app stores for Google, et cetera. But he's absolutely right. When you think about Microsoft and its ambitions is not to sell the most pieces of hardware or more hardware than Sony can. It's really to be the de facto gaming platform, and any device anywhere, all that entire dream. And look, the players who can do that are Google and Amazon, and so the fight may not be as evident today, but I'm pretty sure that's why Google and Amazon are in that business too. I don't think it's because they want. They're not trying to create consoles and so forth. They're trying to create what is going to be the gaming platform of the future, especially when things go more and more digital, when streaming from the cloud becomes more of a reality. What is that platform going to look like? And, Microsoft's a software and services company. And that's where I think, and Amazon is that way, and so is Google. And so, I think Google strikes me as being very, very serious. They've hired a lot of talent there, people who I think look at this. Amazon is in my backyard.
Right.
I don't know frankly, I'm not as close to it. They've been at it for a long, long time. It doesn't seem like they've gotten a huge amount of traction there, but I would never put anything past Amazon and its ability to succeed.
Yeah. So do you find yourself becoming a cheerleader or a critic from the sidelines with Microsoft now, or just the Xbox platform? Do you find yourself going, good move, or what happened there? Are you wincing and cheering, or what's your reaction?
Well, I'm cheering a lot. I'm cheering a lot more than wincing these days.
All right. Way to go.
Look, I left in early 2010 before the launch of Xbox One. And when I was on the board of GameStop starting in the middle of 2011. So when the Xbox One launched the way it did, it hurt me.
Yeah.
It was tragic to watch that happen, because we had, I personally and a lot of other people, we had spent a lot of our careers building the Xbox brand from scratch, competing effectively with the Sonys and the Nintendos of the world. We'd survived the Xbox 360 Red Rings of death, and we finished the Xbox 360 generation basically tied with the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Right? We're poised to actually become the market share leader, and made all the mistakes that Sony seemed to make with the PlayStation 3. And it was disheartening, frankly. And Phil took over, and I think Phil's done an amazing job getting the priorities right, getting refocused, but the damage was done early, and we saw it at GameStop. It was shocking, frankly. But I'm much more of a cheerleader now, and still, because I'm good friends with so many of those guys, I'm still very close to them, and we can chat about the business and what's going on there. And
yeah, do you think it was messaging? I mean, obviously the messaging at the launch of the Xbox One was an issue. So do you look to messaging, or do you look to priorities of just going a little bit too far for trying to be the entertainment system?
No, well, I was a big proponent of adding the entertainment capabilities to Xbox Live, because at the time, this is when things were going over the top really was starting to take off. And Xbox Live had the opportunity to really be part of that discussion. And, it turns out today, of course, you can get content through a variety of means. You don't have to have a console to get it to your TV. People are very adept at casting, video from any device onto the big screen in their lives. But at the time, I thought that was very important. I think the mistakes were, first of all, just going 100% in on Kinect, and all of a sudden you're at 100%, $100 disadvantage for a peripheral that most people did not want.
Yeah.
And I understand very clearly that if you want to get developers to develop for the device, they need to they need to be assured that there's actually an installed base there for them to sell into. And so making it part of every unit, I understand that dynamic. But competitively versus the PS4, which was, Xbox One and PS4 were very similar. You're at $100 price. It was the exact same mistake that Sony had made with, previously. And then the messaging was terrible. So many things were said that were not friendly to gamers, that were arrogant, that made you feel like Microsoft was out of touch. And I think that, look, gamers are passionate people. They have, there's a lot of emotion and so forth. And I think people marched with their feet and their wallets. You would have thought things like Xbox Live were super sticky because you had all your friends. And so it was shocking to me how many people switched. Just shocking. And really, really unfortunate. I think that they've done everything that they can, they run a good business and so forth. But I think everything is being set up for, okay, now how do we really expand? It's going to be a different ball game in the next generation in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. So you think that strategy of kind of blurring the generational lines is a good one for the future, about like, oh, we'll release Halo Infinite, but you can also play it on Xbox One. Just come play the games. You want to stream them, however you want to play it through Game Pass, whatever's fine. Just please come in the door and play a game. You think that's a healthy future?
Totally. I mean, because that's what, look, there aren't a lot of media industries where you sort of go, look, you can only listen to this podcast on this, this current platform, or watch this movie on the, right, with the exception of things like Blu-ray, et cetera. But otherwise, customers want to be able to access their content, which they own, anywhere, any place. Now, that's not easy to do in the gaming business. It's not a song, right? But I think it's becoming more and more of a reality as we go forward. And that's what people want. And that's why I say, and I think most people would say, look, software and services is the platform of the future. You want to abstract the hardware as much as you can. So regardless of whether or not I'm on an iPad or a Android phone or an Xbox or even a Nintendo platform, I want to be able to play the things that I want to play where I can play them. And the technology infrastructure is going to make that more and more of a reality. And it'll be up to companies and I think software companies like Microsoft and Google and so forth, that will be able to make it more of a reality than maybe some of the traditional players who don't have the same software heritage.
Yeah, for sure. What don't gamers understand about the business side of the game industry? Like, what were you pulling your hair out about? Like, you guys, it's not that easy. You know, back in the day when you're doing hundreds of interviews during E3, like, what was the thing that's just like, oh, this is not being communicated. You don't appreciate it, how difficult blank is.
Well, I think I always, what did I used to say? That making games was like herding cats in a goat rodeo. I mean, it is the melding of art and science, but ultimately to create a piece of art. And that's not, again, that's just not easy, especially if you're talking about making great things. There are lots of games that are produced today. There are, good games, et cetera, but to really make the things that we were trying to make in Microsoft Game Studios, at the time, we're really trying for the pinnacle. And, there'd be things like, you remember Alan Wake, and when we unveiled Alan Wake, and oh my God, the anticipation.
Where is
people were, and that was a really hard thing to do, and ultimately, wasn't as successful as we were hoping. But that's the thing. I think most people probably don't have an appreciation, probably like making movies, which I know nothing about, or writing great songs and so forth. And if it was easy, everybody would do it. And I think that's the thing that probably most people don't get when it comes to the games themselves. When it comes to the hardware and so forth, people, I'm sure, don't appreciate just how complex and difficult making these high performance pieces of hardware really are. You don't really think about your computer and everything that goes into it, but you're talking about something akin to that, right? And again, I don't know anything about it, but the hardware guys always told me how hard it was.
Trust us, it's hard. Do you remember like the first meetings you had about the Red Ring of Death? When did you realize that this was going to be a huge issue?
Well, certainly as the reports started to crop up, I mean, this was an extraordinary issue. I mean, this is like Tylenol. You're probably too young, and most of the people who are watching are too young to remember Tylenol. But this when there was poisoning in Tylenol, that was a real life or death situation, literally, for the brand, and that's what it was for us. And because people easily could have said, well, we're going to turn our backs on this. And Microsoft at the time stepped up with an extraordinary 3-year warranty on all Xbox 360s, which is a huge financial commitment, right? When you think about how expensive these products were. And to try to, and that was just one of the things that we tried to do in terms of trying to reestablish some credibility and security for customers for our products so that they wouldn't leave the brand. And again, I'll say, without things like Halo that in Xbox Live that were unique to us, that would keep people faithful, if you will, we would have been in huge trouble. So it was an extraordinary effort across the company, and I give a lot of credit to the senior leaders of Microsoft to step up with that, because a 3-year warranty on a consumer electronics product is basically unheard of.
Were the debates in the meeting rooms and the boardrooms about, do we just kill off this entire division with this? Is it that deadly, or what were the debates that you remember?
No, I don't think. I mean, I certainly wasn't part of a conversation like that. Now, I wasn't running Microsoft Game Studios, so I wasn't maybe involved in the most senior of those conversations. But I don't think I ever heard talk like, oh, we should just kill it off. I think it was always focused on what are the solutions and what can we do what can we do to try to save this? And that's where you just get some incredible steps that the company took.
Yeah. Well, hey, around this time, it should have been when E3 was happening, but obviously not happening here. What's your favorite memory from E3? Like when you think back about E3, what's the defining thing? Is it going up on stage? Is it drinking at a hotel? What defines E3 for you?
Well, certainly going on stage. I mean, that was a nerve-wracking experience, frankly. We talked about our mutual friend Genevieve Waldman, who was our PR person, or my PR person at the time, and I give her and other people in the PR organization a ton of credit for getting me prepared to do that. But I'll never forget that. I think back to my first E3. Gosh, I came 95 or something like that. It was so small and it really nothing. And then to what it eventually became. It's funny because I would go to E3 often and I never get out on the floor because I was always doing interviews with folks like yourself.
Right.
And it's not just U.S. journalists, but also international journalists and bloggers and so forth. And let's see, what else? The E3 that we had to do at Santa Monica High School in Santa Monica. That was the year that Peter Moore told me that he was leaving Xbox to go to EA. That was devastating.
Oh, no.
I loved working for Peter. He's such a great person. And he's gone on to do great things with Liverpool now in Premier League. But that was sad. But I had, generally speaking, I had great memories from E3 because it really was the awakening of not GameStop, but of Microsoft, of really coming into the forefront of this major entertainment industry, where we became a big player. We the first E3 briefings that we did. I can't even remember what the Grauman's Chinese Theater. I don't know. I mean, just these things where we were now part of this world that was not really a part of Microsoft before we came along.
Yeah. Do you think there's a future for E3? Do you think it's just in the past? It's not necessary anymore?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think there's a lot of business that can be conducted without a big trade show like that. I mean, there's something to be said for being able to make it easy for people, customers, journalists, buyers, etc., competitors, to be able to go see everything, at once. And I think, whether it's a Cannes Film Festival or, whatever the different entertainment industries are that have these conventions where people come together and be able to experience the best of the industry. I just think that those things are super important. Is CES going to go away? I don't think CES is going to go away too. I think we're going to adapt to a new normal. I don't know exactly what that will be, but you can see when people's look at the protests. I mean, when people's passions are inflamed, or just their passions, right, about what they care about, they still come out despite some of the health risks that are involved, or some of the risks to safety and things like that. Well, setting aside even the business imperatives of why you would have an E3, a lot of it is about the fans and having something where the fans can come and connect. As super popular gaming. Gaming is going to be around forever, and everybody's a gamer. And so being able to have those types of events where people can go connect, or a Comic-Con, et cetera, I think those things are still going to exist. People may figure out, different way that we have to behave maybe in some of those types of settings, but I don't think they're going away.
Yeah. With like console transition years and being at E3, how much did you know about the competition? I think there's this weird balance where from the outside world, they think like, well, surely they have a rough idea of what Sony has planned or Nintendo has planned. Do you have moles? Are you in the dark? What's going on from your vantage point where you're trying to figure out what like the PlayStation 3 is going to be like?
Ben, I can't tell you that. No.
You're a mole.
No, I think the truth is that it's super secretive, and I mean it's like and I think it's stuff that people take very, very seriously. Obviously, you're going to have leaks and things like that from people, and that happens in anything. But generally speaking, it's super secretive. And I look back to my own experience in Microsoft Game Studios, right? And I was involved in the launch of Xbox 360, and I was around during the launch of, before the launch of Xbox One. And as we're planning for those things, well, it sure would be nice to know what that whole software lineup looks like, right?
Right.
And it ends up being that the only people who are telling anybody anything is Microsoft Game Studios, who's letting people know, okay, this is what the first party lineup looks like. But no third party is telling us, and so forth. But we're sharing information with them, both on the hardware side and the services side, as well as the games. But very rarely did stuff get leaked out because in Electronic Arts or in Activision, et cetera, they're getting that information from both sides or three sides if you include Nintendo. And I think everybody respects those relationships and the proprietary information that's contained therein. But I just used my own experience at Microsoft Game Studios. I never knew anything about what third parties were doing, and that was by design.
Sure.
Because they certainly didn't want us, my organization knowing, even if the hardware guys and the Xbox Live guys needed to know what was happening.
How eye-opening was it then when you moved over to GameStop and were able to communicate with the other companies? Did you feel like you saw a whole new layer to the game industry that you didn't appreciate before?
Absolutely. I found out the Sony guys are not evil. They're really good guys. No, I in all seriousness, I very much enjoyed getting to know the Sony folks during my time at GameStop, and as well as the Nintendo folks. In the 2000s, it was so competitive, right? I mean, it really. Everything was about, and Microsoft's a very competitive company, and so it was very, very competitive. And we didn't think about, oh, hey, they may actually be human beings over there. And it turns out they're actually really good guys. I very much enjoyed getting to know them, and for me, going to a retailer and seeing, the business relationships from a different perspective was fantastic. I mean, that was just awesome.
I know this is too simplistic, but what did you learn? What did you learn about the game industry that you didn't know before?
I mean, it's even minutia stuff like what when you get right into the nuts and bolts of what merchants have to do in the buying and selling and so forth. But just again. I'd seen pitches, a lot of pitches when I was running Microsoft Game Studios. But you get pitches from the publishers about here's what the next Call of Duty might look like 8-9 months in advance and so forth. And so getting to see how they do things differently was definitely interesting. I think I have a much greater appreciation for the role of retail and what brick and mortar retail can still do in the industry, even as more and more things transition online. And that's a lot of the, I was interim CEO of GameStop for a very brief period of time, but there was a real, in my opinion, there was a real need to start the transformation of GameStop from what it had been. And just really seeing it because, coming from a software perspective, of course, we always, we're biased about how, even things like used games, right?
Right.
Of course, when I was at Microsoft, I hated used games. And our developers really hated used games. But when you go to the retail side and you see how many people depend on the currency that they have in their libraries and their hardware to be able to keep playing, it's really eye-opening, right? If I sit in the ivory tower of Redmond, Washington, and at Microsoft, and you think everybody's like you, well, of course they buy everything new. That's not the case,
right?
And so really understanding that connectivity to real people, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And understanding that, look, there's obviously a legion of people who are online, who are playing on Xbox Live and PlayStation Network and so forth. But there are a lot of people, even if they do that, they're still buying at retail if for no other reason, because they have the currency tied up in their existing libraries, and they need to use that. And so, and there's nothing that beats interacting with customers on a daily basis, and that's what GameStop's associates were so good at. And that's why people like going to those stores, is because they could go talk to people who understood their passion and so forth. And I'm not saying that we did everything that we should have to try to, what do we do with that knowledge and so forth. But that touch point, that connectivity is really, in my opinion, really, really valuable, even for publishers and developers.
Yeah, yeah. So you were interim CEO for a brief period, but you're at GameStop for how long?
I was on the board of directors for 8 years.
Okay.
And I left the board last June, so about a year ago. And I was interim CEO for 10 months during that period near the end.
How different was it when you were interim CEO? Did it feel like a completely different position to be the one calling the shots?
Very different. And I think it's something that I didn't appreciate. At Microsoft, I didn't have a lot of interaction with the board of directors of the company. So I didn't really, when I joined the board of GameStop, I really enjoyed that level of interaction. It's more at the strategic level and working with the senior leadership of the company. But obviously, as you become, one of the senior leaders and the CEO in this case, you're hands-on in the operations of the company, the strategy of the company. And you realize, I certainly realized that, look, as involved as I was as a director, and I was very involved as a director, I could never be as close to the business, to the company, as you would if you were management. And I saw things after I became CEO that, I never saw, never knew, right? Before I went, never appreciated as much, both positive and negative, in the company. And then, of course, when you're in management, then you see a different side of the board, maybe than than when you're on the board.
Right.
It's just those dynamics maybe that are natural due to position or juxtaposition. But it was definitely different.
It seems like, so you say you wanted to push more towards going and embracing the digital future at GameStop. It seems like, anybody looking at the situation over the last 10 years could have said that, but why do you think that's more of a challenge than people appreciate to make that shift and prepare GameStop more for the future?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And look, I take as much blame as anybody. I should have, especially coming from the industry, I should have been a louder voice, pushed even harder in the boardroom for the company to transform itself, to figure out how can it play an even more valuable role in the industry, okay, and while the sand is shifting. Yeah. Okay. Now we, as you know, we did do some things. We diversified into telecom retail. We're AT&T's largest independent reseller. I ended up selling that business so that we could focus on the gaming business. But that didn't really address the structural, fundamental issues that the gaming retail business is and was facing. And I should have pushed harder, frankly, in that. And it's how do you remain relevant in this world where more and more of the business is going digital, where companies are having more direct relationships with customers, companies that you're selling product for are disintermediating you. Okay. Now that may just be a reality, but are you just going to keep doing that under the same old terms and conditions, or do you need to come up with a new business model, a new business relationship with these people, especially while you're still relevant and powerful? And I believe GameStop, certainly back then was still very relevant and very powerful, and even today still is relevant and has power. So how are you going to, how are you going to take advantage of the power that you do have today with respect to publishers and hardware vendors and so forth, so that you can be viable and relevant in the future that is coming? And there are things that I think that the company could do.
Do you think, there's a recent example of AMC saying, hey, we're not going to allow Universal films into our theaters anymore if you guys start to release this stuff digitally, and kind of taking that aggressive strong arm stance of, I don't want 1 inch towards digitization or else the relationship's over. You think, is that what it means in your mind, to just be more aggressive with the publishers when you still have some power?
Well, that's nuclear war.
Yeah.
There, right? And sometimes I had a great conversation with people in other industries when I was at GameStop, and particularly at AT&T and so forth. And, look, the bottom line is you have to be willing to go dark on people, right? This is why, and we're no different than a Comcast saying, or any cable provider saying, we're not going to carry the we're not going to carry Cinemax unless we get the right deal, right? And it's chicken egg. It's who's going to blink first, because you need the carriage still today.
Yeah.
But you also need the content. So you really do need each other. And I would prefer not to push the button, but rather have constructive dialogue and figure out a way to move forward. But you have to make sure people understand the realities of the situation, which is that, look, GameStop used games business was over $1 billion. Used to be $2 billion. Okay, that's a lot of customers and a lot of currency that can be used online, right? But we need to remove some of that. Not only do we want to remove the friction of them being able to do that, but also, how do we make sure we're compensated, because our margins are different when things are bought are bought on Xbox Live than they are bought in stores, et cetera. People aren't coming into the stores as often and so forth. I think that that's okay. And the thing about, here's what I'd say about retail. It used to be that people would say that retail's dead, right? Well, retail's not dead. Shitty retail is dead. Okay. And if you look at great retailers today, well, today is hard given the quarantine stuff. But if you look at great retailers today, there are people who are figuring out, the Sephoras of the world, the REIs, the Nikes, the Starbucks, et cetera, who are creating great experiential retail. Well, I believe GameStop could do that too, and become very relevant. But also, I think there was some really great work done with us by a consultant who, really helped us to see something very simplistic. He said, look, if you want to look at, as a public company, if you want to look at valuations, well, look, here's retailers, which is way down here. Here's GameStop, which is below there. And here are companies like Amazon and Netflix and so forth that are valued not just on the basis of their financial fundamentals, but valued in large part because of the network of customers that they have. GameStop has a very large network of customers. You think about PowerUp Pro, PowerUp Rewards in general. How can GameStop figure out a way to monetize that really valuable asset, that network of customers, right? Could we sell memberships? Could we sell subscriptions of some sort? How do we add value to those things? It would have been great to come up with the Amazon Prime for GameStop, right? Imagine you have customers who are paying you $120 a year as opposed to $15 a year to be a PowerUp Reward Pro member. I think that that's actually possible, and that there's value that you can create, not just discounts, but real value too, that you could create and transform the narrative around the company. I think you also have to transform the physical spaces personally, because today they're just too small to really do the kind of experiential retail I think that would be compelling. But I think that opportunity is there. But you transform the dialogue, the narrative around the company from, hey, it's a transactional business that happens to take place in brick and mortar, very little, not as much online, to, gosh, we have 20 million, 25 million customers, members of our program who are doing the bulk of the shopping with us, but also paying there's opportunity. I thought that there was opportunity to really push hard on that. And maybe the company still will. I'm not part of it.
Yeah. I mean, so it's just messaging with that community, seeing what they're interested in, what they'd be interested in paying more for, or is it also a matter of like, we got a lot of data on what these people like to buy and sell here. This seems important.
Yeah, all of that. It's all of that. It's obviously understanding what customers want, but it's a tremendous amount of data, right? You know what people are buying, how often they're buying. Today, with the right kind of technology, you can understand how often they're coming to your stores and things like that. And this buy sell trade, the buying of product from customers and giving them currency in the form of GameStop currency or actual dollars. It's a very powerful thing, right? It's imagine if you could, you really were able to expand that business, because that business is not going away. There will always be people who want to take advantage of being able to monetize what they own. It's a God-given American right, right? To resell what I own. And imagine if you could take that currency then and go to other places and be able to spend that. But the place that you got that currency from was from GameStop. Man, I bet you see a lot more people trading things, right? Because they have that avenue, as opposed to just selling on eBay and things like that, which has some more friction involved with it. So, I think that there's some unique aspects of GameStop's business model that could, potentially be expanded and be part of its foundation for a new future.
Yeah, there's always a lot of criticism to go around of GameStop Online, and some of it's very fair. But then there's an interesting thread that I will always go back to. It was on this messaging board called Resetera, and it just said, hey, you are now the CEO of GameStop. What do you do? And it's like 7 pages of hardcore gamers like, all right, let's try, like, actually, what would I do? And it's distressing that I read through it and I didn't see one good idea. It was just, and it's not, not the quality of the forum. I think it's just a lot of people like, take the golden parachute and get out. Like the best idea is like, I don't know, try to convert it into like a hangout space and then make money somehow. And I'm trying to figure out like how many meetings within GameStop were that exact situation of everyone just sitting around spitballing like, what do we got? What do we got here?
No, I think we had, in the situation that I inherited when I joined, it became very evident to me that, at least from my perspective, that we needed to transform the company and think about a different kind of future. And that's what a lot of our focus was on. And now, if you recall at the time, it was a very interesting time because there was a private equity sale process going on too. So our hands were tied behind our back a little bit because you can't really start initiating large capital projects during a time like that when somebody's looking to buy the company and so forth. And that process unfortunately dragged out much longer than I expected. That's why I ended up being in the job 10 months as opposed to 3 months before we could hire the new CEO. That was a large part of what we talked about, which was what could a new future look like? I mean, Game Informer, there's this incredible media asset that I don't think that the company was taking great advantage of, and could have, again, figured out how does GameStop become much, much more. How does it, the whole could be so much greater than the sum of the parts, in my opinion, but it really was a very sum of the parts type of operation. Look, Game Informer does this. We're just going to leave it alone. It's just going to be this. We're not going to integrate it as much as we could. We could have figured out how to become more and more like a media company too. So all these different aspects of the company, these assets were there, but the business model was not. And so trying to think about what that business model could look like, both with respect to customers as well as the monetization of data, monetization of media assets, things like that. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. I guess you were technically my boss somehow back when I was at Game Informer for a while. I'm trying to piece this together, but it is, I think, a credit to Game Informer that wall is up, and it is seen as such a separate entity. It was always that weird duality of like, we appreciated the distance from GameStop overall. And it's that confusing thing of like, oh, we can make Game Informer more of a media company. I don't really know what that means. It's like Game Informer already is, was and is a media company. So it's always confusing about what exactly that definition is in your mind of what a media company.
It's more GameStop could become more of a media company and leverage the assets and the capabilities of the Game Informer organization much, much better than producing just, even making the frequency of the content that was created more frequent, doing things like what you're doing now. I mean, we didn't really, to my knowledge, there wasn't as much of that going on with customers as could have or should have been going on. And certainly then when you think about how do you create, a subscription or a membership model, right, where customers look at it and go, there's a lot of value here. And when I'm not just going to wait for my monthly release, I'm going to be able to tap in and listen to Ben whenever I want because he's creating. No, I'm serious, right? But
it's the Game Informer show. It still exists. It's very good.
there's just that value that customers go, oh, it's a no-brainer for $10 a month. Of course I'm gonna do that. Plus I get this discount and preferred shopping art, whatever the heck it may be, right? Free shipping. You weave all this stuff in, much like other companies. It's not rocket science. Other companies do this. But you create an opportunity for a different business model, different relationship with customers. And by the way, a closer relationship than I would argue. That's not just dependent on your retail locations. And all of a sudden, I think you start to change the minds of people on Wall Street too, right? And say, look, it's not just, this struggling brick and mortar retailer. It's actually this company that has relationships with this many people around the world. And its retail operations are actually an asset, not a liability. And today, people think of brick and mortar retail locations as solely as a liability, right? And that's, I think, unfortunate.
Yeah. I think from the internet's point of view and the gamer's point of view, it's always that frustrating thing of like, you say you understand the game industry better than most people, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not really a gamer, which I'm not here to judge. That's totally fine and fair. But I think it's that frustrating thing of like, God, I wish there were people who understood games a little bit better at the top of GameStop. How relevant do you think that is? Do you think it's a distraction? It's just so bizarre when people at GameStop are like, I don't really care about games, but let's try and figure out what the gamers want. It's like, well, just talk to a gamer. They'll tell you what you want.
Well, for me, if we're speaking about me personally, it's not unlike when I ran Microsoft Game Studios, which is, look, I'm not a gamer. I'm not going to pretend I know a great game or not, although I am playing a lot more Age of Empires 2 now.
Correct.
But the point is that, look, if you're going to be a good leader, you've got to make sure that you have the right people around you for the job. And for me, like I said, we were getting pitched by developers all the time with new games. And funny, of course, after the success of Halo, most of them were first-person shooters, and I get car sick, so I can't watch the demo, right? But I made sure I had, good people in the room with me who could ask the right questions. People like Phil and Ken Lobb and so on and so forth, who could ask the questions that needed to be asked. What makes this game better than Halo, or different from Gears of War or Rainbow Six, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing is true at GameStop, which is that, look, you've got to bring in the right people. The chief customer officer at GameStop now is a guy named Frank Hamlin, who's a very, very smart guy, very smart marketing guy, et cetera. And he's all about, we need to listen to the gamer community, et cetera, and what they want and so forth. And then we have to figure out how do we best serve that and how can we make money doing it, right? Because it's not a nonprofit.
Right.
So you've got, but you have to have you have to have the right people who know that it's like, I'm not trying to just make up stuff that I think. It's actually, we did a lot of research with customers, and customers are very brutal with us. There's a lot of love for GameStop, and there was a lot of criticism, fair criticism as well. But to me, it's no different than leading any organization, which is that more minds are better than one and more eyes are better than two. And you try to get the best people that you can to help you figure things out.
Yeah. So talking about leading overall throughout your entire career, what do you think is your specialty? What do you think you're better at than maybe other leaders in the industry?
Oh, I don't know about other leaders in the industry. Look, for me, I think, all right. I'd like to believe I'm not stupid. Okay, so I don't think you can be a leader and be stupid. So I'll say that. But I think for me, I guess I try to connect with people as individuals. I believe I have a few important principles. One of which is that acceptance comes with understanding, and I always try to help people understand the decisions that I'm making and why, because I think that's a question that a lot of people don't answer, is the why. And if I can help you, even if I'm delivering really bad news, trying to help people understand why, they may not like it, they may not agree with it, but they hopefully can more easily accept it. And it's just, I've always tried not to pretend I'm something I'm not, and I think people appreciate have a level of honesty and transparency, and I try to be who I am, be a genuine person, and if that's good enough, great, and if not, so be it. But I don't want to be try to be somebody I'm not. And I wish that, Ben, I hope that doesn't make me unique.
You're right.
Unfortunately,
right.
I realize that it may be that way, which is too bad. But no, and I think that that's part of how, when I look back at the quote unquote success I've had, the ability to have good, strong relationships with developers, again, who probably came in with a level of mistrust. But be able to have strong relationships with those people, because I try to be honest and look, this is what we can do, why we can't do this, what we can do, and so forth, and try to, I'm generally a constructive, optimistic person. So, maybe that, that's hopefully resonated with people and enabled me, and I also try to make it very clear to people, look, if as a leader, here's my job. My job is to put people in the best positions to succeed, give them the resources to succeed, provide the air cover, and generally stay out of the way. And make the hard decisions that have to be made. I've seen too many leaders in my career who love the title, they love the pay, they love the perks, et cetera, the office, whatever it is. They can't make a hard decision to save their lives. And sorry, that goes with the job. And it may mean, and this was hard for me because I do like to be liked, but, it may mean you're unpopular, with certain constituents, for a certain period of time. But you don't get to have the job if you're not willing to make hard decisions. But if you can do it in a principled way, with the communication that I've talked about and so forth, I think you can be successful.
Nice. Do you have any tips for MinnMax, a small media company starting up now, with your area of expertise?
Well, are you offering me a board position?
That's right. Yeah, I don't think we have a board. We have a table. That's about as far as we've got.
No, look, one thing I know is that I just applaud guys like you who are entrepreneurs, who are willing to go and do and take risks. And my advice is, at the right time, find the people you should listen to, that you can trust. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who don't want to listen to anybody, too. And I think that that's a mistake. And I've seen people who rely too much on other people. And that's a mistake too. You're a smart guy. I think you can figure it out. But what you have that other people do not have, right, is this passion, this idea for something that can really resonate with consumers. And that's the thing to hold on to. How do you build around that? And really, I tend to think a little bit longer term. It's like when I mentor people, it's always, what do you want to be when you grow up? Okay, what's going to make, do what makes you happy. I believe that you're going to do your best when you're doing what makes you happy. And I assume this is what makes you happy. But a lot of people don't know that, don't know what that is. And so they end up being a little aimless and searching. And when you know what you want to be, then it becomes much easier to plot out how you get there. And so thinking a little bit strategically about where you want to go. It doesn't have to be the end game, but where do you want to go? What do you want to be? I think is super important especially for early stage.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hey, before we let you go, do you have any embarrassing Phil Spencer stories? Like, was he a silly intern at some point, like tripping, trying to deliver coffee, anything like that?
Phil was so great. He did this. I think it was Twitter, and somebody asked him a question like, "Who's their favorite boss that you've ever beaten?" And he wrote Shane Kim. It was so sad that he had to. This was just very, very recently too. It's so sad that. Because we do play some golf together occasionally, and Phil will tell you it's usually the other way around.
Well, this is your chance to get back at him, man.
But I don't know how to use Twitter, so no. I just look. He's a good friend, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. He's been very successful at Microsoft. I think he's a real, he's a interesting mix of business and technical background. And you don't find a lot of guys like that. And not just business and technical background, but an ability to speak to customers in a legit way.
Yeah.
Right, with credibility. And so I don't like saying nice things about Phil, so that's about it. That's enough.
We got it. Well, hey, Shane Kim, thank you for your time today, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Ben, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. And thanks so much for watching or listening to this interview. We'll see you on the MinnMax Show podcast, or maybe even next week for a new interview. Bye, everybody. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.